So you want to own a Formula One team. Picture it for a second. Your name on the side of a car doing 200 miles an hour, 40 million people watching on a Sunday afternoon, your engineers in matching uniforms, your logo on the podium, your drivers spraying champagne over a crowd in Monaco, the most glamorous sport on earth, and you own a piece of it. Here is what that picture costs. Not the entry fee, not the cars, not the drivers, not even the hundreds of engineers sleeping 4 hours a night trying to find a tenth of a second somewhere in the data. What it actually costs to be in Formula One is a number that most businesses would consider impossible, a recurring annual expense that arrives every single year, whether your car finishes first or last, and a structural reality underneath the sport that explains why almost no team in the history of Formula One has ever made real money from racing. And yet, the people who own these teams keep getting richer. Before we get into the numbers, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment right now telling me where in the world you are watching from and what business you are in. Because the people who tend to find this kind of video are not casual fans. They are people who think about money differently. People who look at something everyone else calls a sport and immediately start asking how the economics actually work. If that is you, leave a comment. You'll be surprised how many people watching this right now are thinking the exact same thing you are. Some of the best conversations I have seen happen in those comments. And if you find someone down there who thinks like you do, that connection might be worth more than anything else in this video. Let's start at the beginning, because before you spend a single dollar on a car, you have to get in. And getting into Formula One is not like joining a league. You cannot simply build a team, show up at the first race, and declare yourself a competitor. The sport is controlled by its commercial rights holder and the teams themselves, operating under a structure that makes entry deliberately difficult and deliberately expensive. There are currently 10 teams on the Formula One grid. That number has been remarkably stable for years, and if you want to add an 11th, the existing 10 teams have to agree to let you in. Why would they agree? Because the commercial rights are divided among the teams, and adding a new team dilutes everyone else's slice. So the existing teams charge you for that dilution. The current anti-dilution fee, the price of simply being allowed to enter the sport as a new constructor, is approximately $200 million. That money goes directly to the existing teams as compensation for sharing their pie. You have not built a single car. You have not hired a single engineer. You have not run a single test lap. You have written a check for $200 million, and what you have received in exchange is permission to begin spending money. Now let's talk about what you actually need to build. A Formula One car is not a car in any sense that the word normally means. It is the most complex racing machine ever built, a vehicle that generates more downforce than its own weight, that operates at tire temperatures most industrial ovens cannot reach, and that contains somewhere between 80,000 and 100,000 individual components, each one designed and manufactured to tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter. The aerodynamic surfaces alone, the wings, the floor, the barge boards, and turning vanes, represent hundreds of thousands of hours of computational fluid dynamics simulation, wind tunnel testing, and real-world validation across a season. Building 2 of these cars, one for each driver, costs somewhere between $15 million and $30 million per car, depending on the team's resources and development philosophy. And here's the part that separates Formula One from almost every other form of competition. You do not build 2 cars and then race them for a season. You build a new car every year. The regulations change. The competitors evolve. The car you raced last November is obsolete before the first race of the following March. So that $15 to $30 million development and construction cost is not a one-time investment. It is an annual subscription. But the car is not even the largest line item. People are. A competitive Formula One team employs somewhere between 500 and 1,500 people depending on its scale. These are not ordinary employees. The top aerodynamicists in the sport command salaries of $500,000 to over $1 million annually. Senior race engineers, the people who manage the car's setup and strategy from the pit wall on race day, earn $300,000 to over $700,000. Composite technicians, who hand-build the carbon fiber components that form the car's structure, earn less individually, but the workforce is enormous. Add software engineers, data scientists, logistics coordinators, mechanics, team management, and the facility staff running what is essentially a small advanced manufacturing operation, and the annual payroll of a top Formula One team can exceed $200 million before a single bolt is turned on the car itself.
Then there's the infrastructure.
Every serious Formula One team operates its own factory, typically a purpose-built facility that functions as part design studio, part wind tunnel complex, part manufacturing plant, part simulator center, and part data operations hub. Red Bull Racing's facility in Milton Keynes covers over 50,000 square meters. Mercedes-AMG Petronas operates a similarly scaled campus. Ferrari's Maranello headquarters has been built and expanded over 70 years. These are not rented office spaces. They are permanent industrial facilities that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to build and tens of millions of dollars per year to operate, maintain, and expand. The wind tunnel alone is a significant capital expenditure. A modern full-scale aerodynamic wind tunnel capable of testing at realistic speeds costs $50 to $100 million to construct. The electricity to run it costs millions per year. Formula One's regulations actually limit how many hours of wind tunnel testing each team can conduct in a season, partly because unrestricted wind tunnel access would simply bankrupt the smaller teams. And yet, even within those limits, the aerodynamic development program at a top team consumes an extraordinary fraction of the total budget. So what does a Formula One budget actually look like? Formula One introduced a cost cap in 2021, a mechanism designed to limit spending and prevent the wealthiest teams from simply outspending everyone else into irrelevance. The cap for the 2024 season was set at $135 million per team. For 2025, it sits at approximately $140 million. Here is the crucial detail that most people outside the sport do not understand. The cost cap does not cover everything. It deliberately excludes some of the largest costs in the sport. Driver salaries are excluded. The top drivers in Formula One earn extraordinary amounts of money. Max Verstappen's contract with Red Bull is reported to pay him somewhere between $50 and $65 million per year. Lewis Hamilton's move to Ferrari came with a reported salary of around $50 million annually. These numbers are outside the cost cap entirely. If your two drivers together cost $80 million per year, and that number does not count against the $140 million cap, your real annual spending is already well above $200 million before you have counted the marketing budget, the travel logistics, or the senior engineering salaries that are also partially excluded. Marketing and top management personnel costs are also excluded from the cap. So are the costs of building new facilities. So are the engine supply costs for teams that buy power units rather than manufacturing their own. When you add all the excluded categories back in, the total annual budget of a top Formula One team is somewhere between $400 and $600 million per year. For a midfield team trying to stay competitive, the real annual cost is $200 to $300 million. For the smallest teams, the floor is somewhere around $150 million annually. And at that number, staying competitive with the top teams is essentially impossible. Now let's talk about where the money comes from. Formula One generates revenue and distributes it to teams through a structure called the Concord Agreement, the commercial contract that binds the teams, the governing body, and the Formula One's commercial rights holder together. The commercial rights are currently owned by Liberty Media, the American company that purchased Formula One from Bernie Ecclestone's CVC Capital Partners in 2017 for approximately $8 billion. Revenue distributed to teams comes primarily from two sources: television broadcast rights and race hosting fees. Formula One's global broadcast deals are substantial and growing. The sport reaches around 1.5 billion viewers across the season, broadcast in over 180 countries. Liberty Media has aggressively expanded the sport's media footprint, particularly in the United States following the Drive to Survive documentary series on Netflix, which debuted in 2019 and transformed Formula One's North American fan base from a niche following into a mainstream cultural phenomenon. The United States went from hosting one race on the calendar in 2012 to hosting 3 races in 2023, with events in Austin, Miami, and Las Vegas. The Las Vegas Grand Prix alone generated an estimated $1.2 billion of economic impact for the city in its inaugural 2023 running. The hosting fee for that race was reported at around $50 million, paid by the promoter to Formula One for the right to hold the event. With hosting fees, broadcast rights, and other commercial income combined, Formula One's total revenue for 2023 was approximately $3.2 billion. Of that, a percentage is distributed to the teams. But the distribution is not equal. This is where the structural inequality inside the sport becomes visible. Teams receive prize money based on their finishing position in the Constructors' Championship at the end of each season. The top team receives significantly more than the bottom team. But beyond the performance-based column payments, Formula One also pays what are called Column 1 payments, a base distribution that every team receives simply for participating, and heritage bonuses that reward certain long-standing teams with additional payments for their history in the sport. Ferrari receives a unique bonus payment reported to be around $35 to $40 million per year simply for being Ferrari. The largest payments from Formula One's prize fund can reach $150 to $200 million annually for the top constructors. The smallest teams receive significantly less, sometimes as little as $70 to $90 million. Consider what that means in practice. A top team's prize money might cover between 30% and 50% of its actual annual budget. The rest has to come from somewhere else. That somewhere else is the owner, or more precisely, the owner's other businesses. Ferrari is a publicly traded company, and Formula One is genuinely part of its commercial strategy. The racing program builds the brand that sells the road cars. A Ferrari road car customer is not paying for the engineering inside the car alone. They're paying for the emotion of Ferrari, the red cars, the racing history, the wins at Monza and Monaco, the mythology of the prancing horse. That brand value created and sustained by racing allows Ferrari to charge prices for road cars that no other manufacturer can justify on engineering grounds alone. An entry-level Ferrari road car starts at around $230,000. The waiting list for some models runs years. Formula One is not a loss for Ferrari. It is an advertising budget so powerful it doubles as a cultural institution. Red Bull operates similarly. Red Bull's parent company sells energy drinks. The entire Red Bull brand, the extreme sports, the racing teams, the content machine that spans Formula One, motocross, cliff diving, and air racing is a marketing operation built to sell a beverage. Red Bull Racing's budget is Red Bull's global marketing spend, and it is extraordinarily effective. Red Bull commands premium pricing and global brand recognition in the energy drink category that competitors cannot match despite spending comparable amounts on traditional advertising. From Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, and Aston Martin, the F1 team is not a sports franchise being run for profit. It is a technology demonstration and brand investment that happens to also function as a racing team. But then there are the teams in the middle and at the bottom. Williams Racing, one of the sport's historically most successful constructors with 7 Constructors' Championships, was sold by the Williams family in 2020 to Doralton Capital, an American private investment firm. The team had run out of money. After decades of operation, a family that had built Formula One's winningest private constructor was forced to sell because the annual cost of remaining competitive had grown beyond what private family ownership could sustain. Haas F1 Team, the American constructor that entered the sport in 2016, has spent nearly a decade as a customer team, buying as many components as the regulations allow from Ferrari and focusing its limited budget on the parts the rules it requires it to build itself. The team's annual budget is reported at around $130 to $150 million, which, in the context of the sport, makes it one of the smallest operations on the grid. Gene Haas, the team's owner, funds the deficit between revenue and spending from his other businesses, which include a successful machine tool manufacturing company. Sauber, which races under the Stake F1 branding and is transitioning to become the Audi Works team from 2026, has cycled through several ownership structures and financial crises over its history. The team's survival has required intervention from multiple corporate partners and ownership groups over the decades. The pattern is consistent. Almost no Formula One team makes money from racing. The sport is financially sustainable for teams attached to large corporations using the racing program as a marketing and brand investment. It is financially precarious for teams trying to operate as independent sporting entities. So why does anyone buy one of these things? The answer has 3 parts, and none of them are about winning races. The first is asset appreciation. When Liberty Media purchased Formula One in 2017, the sport's total enterprise value was approximately $8 billion. By 2024, analysts estimated the sport's total commercial value somewhere between $15 and $20 billion. The combined valuation of all 10 teams has grown dramatically over the same period. McLaren's valuation has been reported above $3 billion following investment rounds. Aston Martin attracted investment from Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund at a valuation reported above $2 billion. Williams changed hands in 2020 at a price reported around $200 million and is likely worth considerably more today given the sport's growth. The simple act of holding a Formula One team license, one of only 10 in existence, has become one of the fastest appreciating assets in professional sports.
The second is the media and brand ecosystem that Formula One has become, particularly since Drive to Survive. Formula One is no longer simply a sport. It is a content platform, a fashion statement, a travel destination, and a technology showcase simultaneously. The sport's social media following has tripled since 2018. Its youngest demographic, the 16 to 35 age group, is its fastest growing. Sponsors are not simply buying logo placement on a car, they are buying access to one of the most coveted young global audiences in media today. That audience value is not captured in the team's racing revenue. It is captured in what sponsors are willing to pay to reach it, and in the commercial opportunities that extend far beyond the race weekend itself. The third is access. Like major sports franchises in American leagues, a Formula One team is a permanent invitation to a room where decisions get made. The Formula One paddock on a race weekend is one of the most exclusive networking environments on Earth. Every major corporate sponsor, every government wanting to attract a Grand Prix, every luxury brand seeking association with the sport flows through the paddock. The relationships formed there do not appear on the team's balance sheet, but they shape the commercial lives of the people who own these teams in ways that dwarf the racing economics. Stefano Domenicali, Formula One's chief executive, said publicly in 2023 that demand to join the grid has never been higher. Multiple billionaire-backed groups submitted expressions of interest in joining as an 11th team. The anti-dilution fee was raised. The demand for a license that loses money every year, reliably by design, is at an all-time high. That is the real economics of Formula One. You buy a team. The team loses money racing every single year. The budget required to remain competitive grows faster than the prize money the sport distributes. The sponsorship required to close the gap gets harder to sell if you are not winning, and winning requires spending more than you earn. The math does not work. And the asset is worth more every single year regardless, because there will never be an 11th team unless the 10 existing teams agree to allow it, because the sport's media rights are growing, because the global fan base is expanding into markets that have barely been tapped, because Formula One has become one of the last remaining live sporting spectacles that hundreds of millions of people will stop everything to watch in real time. The car loses money every lap it drives. The license it runs under gets more valuable every lap it drives. So the next time you watch a car cross a finish line in Monaco with a driver you recognize and a sponsor you recognize and a team principal in front of the cameras talking about performance and results and championships, understand that the most important number in that organization that day is not on the timing screen. It is the valuation that just went up because the car crossed the line at all.